Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Anglers Channel Extra, brought to you by Sportsmans Warehouse. Now here at AnglersChannel.com, we work hard to make sure you guys get the latest in trends, new products, tournament results, and more all across this country in the sport of bass fishing. But today's webcast is one you have to see. Carl Jocumsen won his first Bassmaster Elite Series event in 2019 over on Oklahoma's Lake Chickamauga. Now that was a very special moment for Carl. I know for fans alike, like myself, it was really cool to watch. Carl's the first Australian to qualify for the Elite Series and hence the first Australian to ever win one of those big blue trophies. Anglers Channel's Kenneth Grover recently caught up with Carl over on Lake Chickamauga to get the 411 on a new technique Carl's been working on called the glide bait, or Glidaaaaaa as we like to say. Let's head to Lake Chickamauga and check it out.
Here we are, have a special treat today. Have an opportunity to get on wonderful Chickamauga Lake today. We're with Carl Jocumsen, and really the goal of today is to go over glide baits.
Yep.
Glide baits is something you've been using for quite a while. You had the opportunity to work with Molex on a brand new bait.
Yep.
Spend a lot of time on this. Kind of the goal for today is for you to give us a tutorial on how it's used. I know glide baits, I don't know anything about them though.
Yeah.
So kind of glide bait 101.
Yeah, there's just so much to it, you know, and recently I've gotten to take a couple guys out that, you know, are phenomenal fishermen, and they wanted to learn the glide bait too, and there was a few things that even they were doing that I was like, you need to change this, this and this, and it's the difference between literally getting no bites and getting a lot of bites and landing those fish. So there's a lot of small little things, and we're at the prime time on Lake Chickamauga right now. Been catching some really nice fish. Haven't caught a 10 this year yet, but it's about to sort of happen in the next month. And this is the bait to do it, and it's just a bait that I have a lot of passion for and so much fun. I just love it, and then being able to design this bait with Molex has been really fun, and then to see it working and people catching fish on it and having success. So we're going to go over all the little things today, the little things that make the big difference when it comes to glide baiting.
So from what I've seen so far, this bait is, you're right under the surface, you know, not very far. It's about to where we can see it.
Yeah.
So is this really a bait that you're counting on sight feeders, fish that actually can see it and have them draw to it?
The reason it works so good is because of the action. So you want fish seeing it and looking at it, but the big probably misconception that people have is you want crystal clean water and want fish to see it from a mile away. This to me, in the south, is like borderline clear. Like, I don't want to see that bait coming all the way back like that. I don't want to be able to see it. I want to get it down away where I'm not actually seeing it and the fish aren't getting as good a look at it. And you know, the big thing with the glide bait is has drawing power. So it glides and does things that a normal bait doesn't do, so fish get interested in it. If it's too clear and not enough wind or cloud cover, they get too good of a look at it, so they're going to follow it the whole way. But big fish are smart, and they're not going to eat it. But if we can get a little bit of colour in the water, or we can get wind and cloud and broken up light, they're not going to be able to see it as good, and so it'll act more like cloudy water. But when it's still like this, I want the water to have a little bit of colour in it, so they feel that action, and then they just see it. Instead of following it, they're going to react and actually eat it.
So they know it's there. They can't see it well enough to realize that it's not the real thing, so they get closer to it.
Yeah, they're going to
and then the action itself is what you're hoping to let them actually eat the bait.
And then that's when you're going to hopefully do the right twitches, there's a lot to it. It's not just about rolling it back. There's a lot to actually getting that fish to react, and we'll go over that as the day goes on. But we're trying to get that fish's interest, draw them in, and when they see it, we're going to do an erratic, panicked action and get that fish to react and eat it.
Well, you know, instincts of a bass, especially big bass, which is really kind of what you're targeting here, is they want an easy meal, they want a big meal, but then their instincts take over. Once they get up and they get behind the bait, you know, like you said, sometimes that erratic movement is what really gets them to make that final judgment of, hey, I'm going to go ahead and eat that bait.
Yeah, and that's been a big thing that like I've wanted to design with Molex is like a lot of baits, glide baits will glide very well, but when you fast twitch it and get that erratic action going, they'll dive or turn on their side or roll or blow out. You need this bait to chop, and it's called chopping, and it'll almost turn back on itself, but it'll fast turn, and that's when you're going to get the bites. And the big one that I've learned is a lot of people are going to roll it all the way back until they see a fish, and then when they see a fish, they're going to try and get that fish to react and eat the bait. I want them to react and eat it out there away from the boat.
Right.
So that's why you're going to see me rolling it a little bit, stopping, pausing, then short, sharp chops, and then back into a roll. And I'm going to keep it erratic all the time, out there away from the boat, so those big fish don't get spooked when they get in close.
So in your mind, you're assuming that during your cast that there's already a fish there, even though you can't see it. You're going to assume that fish is there looking at it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The whole time, I'm basically in my mind, I'm going to pretend that there's a fish looking at that bait all the time, and I'm going to try and get it to react, because it's got a lot better chance of eating it way out there than it does right next to the boat, especially a big smart fish.
I imagine it also helps you in landing the fish as well.
Well,
a fish striking close to the boat sometimes is hard to handle.
Yeah, and the big one is, like, you don't want to, if you see that fish eat it, you got a lot bigger chance of losing that fish, because you're going to tend to set the hook early, you're going to strike, pull the bait away. What you want to do, ideally, I always tell people, you want to not even know that you got a bite. You want to be like, oh, am I in the bottom? And you start to load up, and then you're like, it's a fish. That thing's going to have every hook in it. Where if you seeing it there and it comes up and chops at it, you got way more likely for you to react and pull that bait away. So I always want to try and get those bites out there away from the boat. So a big one is like glide baits. Everyone thinks it is shallow like that up high, but it's not necessarily. You can change the depth of the glide bait with the size of your hooks. You can weight them, you can get them down deep and fish it the same. But right now we've got mid-60s water temp. Those fish want to be dead shallow. They want to be kind of spawning. So I've gone #1 hooks to try and keep that bait up high and gliding right in front of those fish. Keep it up shallow.
Okay.
But as it gets hotter, or when it's colder and those fish are suspending or down a bit deeper, I'm going to upsize my hooks. I'm going to fish a chin weight maybe, and I'm going to get that bait to get down to where those fish are. It's not just a total shallow water bait.
For this part of the country, the lakes, you know, I know you've used it on Guntersville. Obviously, we're on Chickamauga now.
Yeah.
What is the deepest that you've ever fished one of these baits with effectiveness?
Well, up north in Idaho, I learned a lot up there because with Brandon being up there, they have the crystal clean, beautiful lakes, and those smallmouth eat the kokanee salmon, and those fish came out of 22 feet to eat it up close near the top. But they were actually able to see that bait. But I'll fish it no problem, like down 10 feet, you know, easily, like getting it down there and fishing it 10, 12 feet. And then if it's clear enough, those fish are going to come up for it as well.
From bass and walleye to crappie and the great outdoors, you deserve more than old school aluminum. Reward yourself with the quality, performance, and extra room in a Ranger aluminum design. Packed with features, these rigs carry an ultra-smooth, dry ride and stable platforms. Experience a Ranger aluminum boat today. It's built to excel and priced to be yours. Mercury, go boldly.
This portion of our program is brought to you by Strike King Lose. Go ahead, tie one on. By Ranger Boats. Quality redefined. Performance reimagined. And powered by Mercury. Do more of what you love on the water. Back to Anglers Channel Extra. Brought to you by Sportsmans Warehouse.
Glide baiting when they're when it's not ideal or something's not happening, you're trying to figure it out. it can be a lot of casts for nothing, but it can turn into pure mayhem in one cast. That's the beauty of a glide bait. It can be slow for a long time, but then out of nowhere you can look down, there could be a 12-pounder sitting behind your bait.
Right. You know, that you talk about that, and that a lot of guys struggle in learning new baits because they're wanting that instant gratification.
Yeah.
They want to be able to use it and catch fish right off the bat, and when they don't, they put it down and pick up something they're used to throwing.
Yeah.
So this is something I know you've been doing for several years now. How did you start out, you know, a couple of years ago, and kind of tell us a little bit about how you got hooked on the glide bait?
Yeah, what I got lucky with being friends with Brandon and Oliver Nye and a few of those guys that were already, you know, really into the glide bait scene. But I had used them back home in Australia a lot for our barramundi and our Murray cod. And so I had an idea, but the way I fished it back home was not how you tend to fish it here. But what really got me interested is I wanted to try and get confidence in it and develop it to be able to put it into my arsenal for an actual tournament bait. Everyone's so scared of it, and they're, you know, never going to have it on the deck of their boat actual tournament day. Right. But now this bait doesn't leave my deck, and any situation, any place, I'm gonna have it sitting there. Because I've just kind of found a place for it. Right. And I've just put the time in and know when and where and why to throw it. And that'll kind of, putting the time in that I have done has helped me do that and build that confidence with it. But pretty much, you know, once I saw the power of it and the size of the fish that wanted to follow it and bite at it and also eat it, it got me hooked, and I just put so much time then into it because it just becomes so fun. As soon as tournament season finished, I was picking the glide bait up and just, that's all I'd want to do. And I can throw this all day and not get a bite and be perfectly happy. And there's not many techniques that will let you, you know, that you can do that with, that you're like, man, I wish I tried something else. I'm like, no, because when you put this down, your chances of catching that fish of a lifetime, that state record, any of those is gone. This is the bait that's actually going to do it.
It just takes one cast to make that happen.
Yeah, yeah. This is the bait that is actually specifically targeting a big fish. Like any other bait, you're sort of just trying to get a bite, no matter what really it is. A glide bait, you're really putting all the eggs in going after a big one. But yeah, it has been really fun to then get the confidence to put it into my tournament arsenal and actually utilize it. And in 2018, I had my best year ever solely because of the glide bait. What we're doing right here, it looks like a bluff wall, but it's only like 6-7 feet just out here, so it's actually kind of shallow. But you know, in California and some of the clear lakes, they tend to do really big casts and cover big points or big flats and roll that bait back. But in the south here, and what we'll do later, and when you see me get around some docks or laydowns, it's all about accurate casts. Like, you can't be scared to get this bait in like the tightest spots, like just like you would fish a spinnerbait or anything that you need to get around cover. Right. In the south, this bait generally needs to be around cover. And so I'm going to get in close and I'm going to pick stuff apart with it and get that bait to crawl in and out and around the docks, around laydowns, around stumps, and get those fish to come out of their ambush point and actually eat it. Oh, there he is, little guy. 3-pounder was behind it. When you're getting follows, if you get too many, you want to see a couple follows. So at least I know now, like, okay, they are in a mood to actually get out after it.
Right.
But you don't want to see too many follows. If you're seeing too many follows, you need to change things up. You need to speed up, you need to slow down, you need to change the action. Like, they shouldn't be following it, they should be eating it out there. So
right.
If I start seeing too many follows, I'm gonna turn my hydro wave up a little bit, change the noise on that, change the action of my retrieve, change cast angles, get in a better position where there's some wind. But we were slick calm before, and now we got some wind and a fish followed it straight away. So that sort of shows you just the power of just having that broken up surface
right.
a little bit.
They're not as wary to come up and take a look at it.
Yeah.
Now, you talked a little bit about, you know, the importance of fishing this bait around the cover and making good tight casts. So go into your setup of your rod and reel, and because that's got to be very important to be able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. The biggest thing I tell everyone that is interested in a glide bait, that wants to get into it, if you're a bass fisherman, like, this needs to be a part of your arsenal, because it's an incredible technique, and it gives you a shot at an absolute fish of a lifetime at any cast. And so the biggest mistake most people make is they buy a glide bait first, and then they put it on their flipping outfit, they put it on like just their heaviest rod that they've got, and they try and fish it, and they just don't have like an enjoyable experience with it. They either don't get any bites at all, or they get some bites and they lose those fish, and so it sort of can be disheartening. So what I tell people is get a real deal glide bait, swim bait setup, and just have that as your swim bait setup, and just leave it. That's it. That's your swim bait, glide bait, big bass setup. And when you do that, you'll increase your chances of having a great experience with the bait. And if you hook a fish of a lifetime, you got a lot better chance of getting it in.
Right.
So for me, I use Miller rods. Ian Miller is basically been building rods for 40 plus years. And he designed, it's called the Dream Freak. It's 8 feet long. The biggest key with it is the rod butt length right now. You can see with the reel out in front of me, this rod is still up under here. If this rod was short like this and a fish bit it, I'm not going to have the power to be able to actually handle a big fish. And also with the casting, it just makes it super simple. Like, you've got a lot more leverage to just make it nice and easy. You don't want to be worn out casting this thing, right. After an hour you're that worn out, you don't want to throw it anymore. So it needs to be nice and easy, so that rod butt gives you nice easy leverage for short pitches, but also you can really get back and wind up and make a big long cast, like if I wanted to down this bluff wall.
Right.
So rod butt length is everything, and then this has just got tons of power down low, but it has tip, so it's got plenty of feel, so it's going to allow that bait to glide and work, and I can actually feel it gliding through the tip, and that tip's going to load up, keep that fish on, and then the power is actually going to be down low and work like be able to handle a 10 plus pound fish without giving in.
Right. So
Dream Freak for the rod, 8 foot long, nice and light, plenty of tip, but lots of power. And then the big one is in the reel. I have 2 setups, and they're both Shimano Tranks, a 300 and a 400. Big crank handle is very important, so it's a nice big handle, makes just little short chops and winds just easy. I'm not like working hard to work this bait, it's just, everything's just simple. And the key is the big crank handle, and then 5.8 to 1 ratio. So nice, super slow ratio is going to help you not only bring that bait back easily, but if I hook a giant, it's going to then act like a winch. And I don't want that fish to like be able to pull back. I want to be on top of that fish. So the 5.8 is going to help me just winch that fish in, get it to the boat, and get it in, and not sort of let it have the power to sort of get over the top of me. So for nice slow ratio, big crank handle, 8-foot rod, and then the best line for me has been 25 pounds straight through fluorocarbon. So you can go down to 20, you can go up to 30. I've used both in different situations, but 25 just does everything. 25 pound sunline shooter is a low stretch fluorocarbon, and it does the job for me. It's been an amazing line, and I've used it for a lot of years. And then once you get rod, reel, line set up like that, then it's all about doing the little things with the bait, which we'll go over with hooks, swivels, snaps, and things like that to get that bait to really glide and chop.
So you talked a lot about, you want the bait to really be at the point where you can really barely see it or not see it at all.
Yeah.
But you're also looking for fish to follow. So how important are the sunglasses that you wear, and how do you make that decision?
Yeah, no, you want to have a really good pair of polarized sunglasses. Everyone should. I use two different types. I've got Amphibias, that's the ones that I use. Amphibia have been awesome, and they've just got two lenses, and right now that we're in the shade, I'm using the yellow, really bright style lens, and then if we get out in the sun, I'm going to put the darker amber lens on. And like, I'll watch the bait when it's around structure, because I'll actually see it and then I'll know when to kick it back out so I don't get it stuck. But once it's past there, I tend to want to just look around and not follow it, because even if a fish follows it, I don't want to pull it out of the way or do. You got to have a lot of self-control. But for me, I've gotten to the point now where I do want to see that fish, because if I see that fish, I'm going to change my retrieve up and see the way it's acting and actually try and get it to eat that bait. So I'll sort of midway, I'll watch that bait, that first little bit around the structure or around the drops, wherever I'm casting it, and then I'll tend to just take my eyes off it a little bit while I fish it back. And then when it gets close, I'm going to look down and watch that bait and look for that fish following it. Be very wary of when that bait first lands, because that's when you'll get so many of your bites. You see that bait land, I'll kick it. So the second that bait lands, it'll do that splash and I'll kick it, and that bait will turn left or right and turn, and 90% of your bites will come like that. And because it's just such a good reaction. It's just landed and that bait's just gliding to the side, and if there's a big fish sitting there, it's very hard for it to resist and not eat it.
Now, you were telling us before we started, this particular bait you're using, I mean, to me it looks just like a real shad.
Yeah.
Here, sitting here watching it, I mean, for this part of the country, I mean, that's like a perfect color in my opinion.
Yeah.
Now, you were telling us that you had actually been using this bait and had lost it.
Yeah.
Give us that story again.
So, the Molix baits are actually fairly new, but over the last, I've had them all for all the colours, the 4 colours for the last month, and I've been wearing them out. I've been going with them, and the main one for chick is this new colour that they send me, and it's a very lifelike white shad colour, looks perfect, just like a threadfin, and it has just been getting bites everywhere. Well, they've got a really good bluegill colour, and so I've been going back and forward with that one, but they just, on chick for some reason, they just haven't been on that bluegill colour as aggressive as this shad one. My lake at home, I've been catching some good fish on it, and I got this bait caught and I couldn't get it back. And I tried everything, and I actually cut the line and tied it to try and come back to get it. And when I did, the line had been broken, and I tried everything to get this bait back. Well, you guys were coming out to do the glide bait here, and I'd actually been catching some good ones on the bluegill one down at some other lakes. And I'm like, man, if you guys are coming out, I need that white one. So last night, now before dark, I went back out there and I dragged the crankbait around for about 20 minutes and I hooked that line. And then it took me about another 20 minutes and I got the bait back. So this bait has survived a couple of weeks under the water, and then I cleaned it up, and now it's back out on chick getting after it.
That's awesome. It didn't affect it, because in watching it, it certainly is working very well.
Yeah.
I mean, that bait really kicks. It almost turns. It's almost turning backwards.
Yeah, yeah. That's what you you actually don't, like, a lot of guys will talk about getting it to really turn, but you really don't want it to kick all the way around, because when that does that, you'll tend to get the line looped around a hook all the time. You want it to kick kind of 90 degrees for you at the, you know, maybe just start to turn back around from the other way. But yeah, you don't want it to go too far, because you'll get a lot of fouled casts that way. But yeah, it's been fun to work on this bait and get it to do exactly what it needs to do to get those bites.
And sitting here watching you work this bait, I mean, you're not working it hard. I mean, looking at the bait, if you just watch the bait, you think, man, he's putting a lot of action into that. It's just a half crank of the reel really gets it to move side to side.
Quarter to half a crank is all it needs, and it really just needs, you touch that, you just quarter turn it and touch it, it's going to turn. And so a lot of guys will use their rod, you know, try and twitch it like this. You'll see I'll never use my rod. All I'm doing is pointing my rod tip. I'll always point my rod tip directly at the bait, and that reason is because if I'm like this, watch what my rod's doing every time I do this.
Right.
The rod's giving in, and so that bait's not going to do, you know, what it needs to do. So I'll always point the rod tip straight at it. That way you got a direct line, and all the action is coming straight from the reel.
Whether day or night, I love to tie one on.
Every day of the week, I like to tie one on.
I don't care who's looking, I always tie one on.
Every time I go in the water, I love to tie one on.
You may not know this about me, but every once in a while, I've been known to tie one on.
Come on, man. Join the Strike King team. All you gotta do, tie one on.
I think I always tie one on.
Promotional consideration provided by Visit Anderson, South Carolina's bright spot, by Toyota, built to go the distance, by Ranger Boats, still building legends one at a time, and by Humminbird Minn Kota, making every cast count. Back to Anglers Channel Extra, brought to you by Sportsmans Warehouse.
We talked earlier about you helping Molix develop this bait, spending time on that.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I've noticed in looking at, now that the bait is out, this bait retails in the $25, $26 range.
Yeah.
You start comparing that to other glide baits, man, some of them are several $100s.
Yeah.
Tell us how you're able to do that.
You know, they all have a place, and I have $500 swim baits, you know, and I have $200 swim baits. But that was the thing that I think a lot of us wanted to change. Is it sucked for people that didn't have the money or want to spend that kind of money, but wanted to get into glide baits. Now you can get a glide bait under $30 and catch a ton of really great fish on it, and it work and do all the things that an expensive bait does. The main reason you're paying big dollars for some of those swim baits is they're handcrafted, they're handmade, and it's totally understandable that those guys want to ask that for it, and they do an incredible job on them. Right. But these are able to do you know, better numbers and big numbers and different colors and sizes and all the different things, and still put all the technology into the bait that it needs to do the right things. I've got, you know, probably 20 glide baits at home that I've tried and tested, and some of them, you know, some get bites and some don't. That's just how it is. And so when you finally get a bait that fish just bite, it's kind of exciting, and that's what's happened with this one. Is I worked with them, you know, for probably over a year back and forward, and they got the shape and design perfectly, but the action, you know, wasn't right, and that's where I sort of came in and had to tweak and tweak and tweak until that bait did exactly what I needed it to do, to know that fish are actually going to really bite it. And so now you got kids and guys that are just getting into it, that want to try it, can buy a $30 glide bait and they go out and catch, you know, their biggest bass of their life.
Right.
It's pretty cool. When you see it working back like that and it looks good and it does those fast, good chops, it looks like it's doing it easy, but I can, in my retrieve, if I go too hard or too soft with it, but mainly if I chop it too fast, it can blow out or turn or do something. So there's a fine line with learning like exactly what that bait wants to get it to do the perfect action. But the good part about the Molex is what I want to work on is make it as simple as you can get it without having like a lot of baits. And at the start, like you had to be so detailed in every twitch, every movement. And when a fish came along, if you twitched it too hard, it would roll and turn on the side and that fish would go away. And so the cool thing about the Molex is it's very hard to get it to blow out or turn or do anything. You can burn it fast, you can do a lot with it. So if you're just getting into glide baiting, it's a very good bait to learn from because it's going to be pretty easy.
Well, we've talked a lot about, you know, at any cast that, you know, that magic fish can come up and eat it. So you get that one opportunity, golden opportunity. You don't want to mess up by, like you said, the bait rolling out wrong or whatever. You want to give increase your odds of catching that bass when you have that one opportunity.
You get the chance, exactly. You throw this enough, it's going to happen. The only main time you get follows is clear water and no wind. That's when you'll get just follows and no bites. That's when they can just get way too good of a look at it. I caught a 5-pound smallie on it here a month and a half ago, about a month ago.
I can see that. I mean, smallmouth can get really aggressive.
Yeah.
I've been sitting here thinking, you know, there's some places in Alabama spotted bass probably eat that thing too, because they're.
Lanier, the biggest spotted bass I've ever seen in my life, was trying to eat glide at Lanier, and I've caught close to 5-pounders on it at Lanier. It's unreal there, but the spotted bass love it. They're so aggressive.
Yeah.
The big spots.
So Carl, when we started this morning, we were kind of in areas where, like you said, you were targeting specific spots, shorter casts. Yep. We've kind of moved out on a flat now. You're making long casts. So kind of explain how you go through this technique.
Yep, so this is like, there's so many ways to fish the glide, so many different scenarios. This one is a feeding flat. There's shell bars and little drops, little high spots all through here. And so now I'm actually covering ground with it. I'm doing big long casts over the top of these feeding grounds, and I'm just trying to make it look like a big lone gizzard shad just coming in up over the top of them. And so instead of short little accurate casts, now I'm doing big long casts and trying to actually cover as much ground as possible. So I'm going to start with a pretty aggressive retrieve, try and get a reaction bite, and if I can't get one, we'll slow down. I think nearly everything we do in fishing, when you're not getting bites, slowing down is usually the first thing that you need to do.
Right.
You know, we're lucky. Like, the big thing in the south here is like the fish just haven't seen it as much. They have on this lake, so you have to be pretty dialed in to get them to eat it here. But generally, you can go to a lake and no one mightn't have thrown a glide bait there. And in California, you just don't have that. Those fish are so smart.
Right.
Only the really good guys get the opportunity to catch those fish that are super dialed in, where here you can go to a lake and throw it around and those fish might never seen it before, so they're going to eat it. They're not going to be quite as wise on it.
Now I see you looking down at your hummingbird. Tell us a little bit about what you're looking for here.
Yeah, 360 has been a real life changer really when it comes to fishing. A win at Tinkella was because of 360. Pretty much, I would say 80 to 90% of the fish I catch these days is because of my 360. And I'm able to throw my bait at structure and areas that other anglers aren't. You know, when you're going down the bank and you're fishing the hard edge, I'm still able to see small little changes out off the bank, whether that's a stump or a lay down or a rock bar, a chunk of grass, so many things. And I'm on this flat, and it's a big open flat, but there's little things that change and draw those fish to hold on this flat. So one glance down and I can see that there's nothing around me, but back there was a lay down. So I was able to put 2 or 3 casts over that lay down, super accurate, and then keep moving. And
right.
Those casts to those bits of structure that haven't been hit that hard are super important.
Well, you know, and throwing this glide bait in particular, you're really looking for the dominant fish in the area.
Yeah.
So that isolated piece of cover could mean the difference of catching that fish or not.
Yeah. So, when a big fish is generally going to hold on the biggest bit of structure. So, and even when you throw it around numbers of fish, that it helps because your first cast in there, that the little ones aren't going to come and attack it like they will another bait. So that's going to give the opportunity for that sort of bigger, slower fish to come and eat it. I'll always, even though I know there's fish in it, say I know an area it's got fish, I'm not going to try and catch a bunch of fish first and then catch the big one. I'm going to throw a big bait in there first, try and catch that big smart one,
right,
and then pick off the smaller ones. A lot of guys use a glide bait just to see where the fish are. Just if you're at a lake and you're struggling to catch fish and you're not sure what they're doing, pick up a glide bait and just glide it around some places, and they'll usually show themselves. Like it'll draw them out of a dock, it'll draw them out of areas, and even though they mightn't eat it, it shows you, okay, they're in there, now
right.
I've got to figure out how to catch them.
Right.
And a lot of elite series and professional anglers use it for that exact reason.
You know, I was thinking about that earlier, I'm trying to relate this bait to other baits that I've used that to me have sort of the same type action.
Yep.
A jerk bait.
Yeah.
But I also, and I do this a lot when I'm fishing clear water lakes where there's spotted bass, I'll throw a fluke type bait.
Yep.
And I'm not necessarily looking to catch fish as much as I am seeing fish.
Seeing them come up.
Like
on it.
lakes this time of year that come up real fast.
Yeah.
I want to know, are the fish coming up with that water or are they not? Sometimes I can run down a bank with a bait like that and I can tell if the fish are up or not just because they're interested and curious, they'll come look at it.
Yeah.
To me, this is a bait that I'd rather do that with because the kind of fish that I'm looking for, this is going to draw those fish out.
And give yourself a shot at actually hooking and catching a giant at
right.
the same time. You'll see what happens when we start getting around fish. Like, we've sort of made 2 moves. We've gone from sort of an inside rock wall to a riprap wall, but the riprap was very shallow leading into a bridge. Now we're trying to flat, and we're just eliminating areas right now. And we haven't had a whole lot of success except for that one follow. But the things are right. They're gonna eat this when we get around them, so we just have to keep moving until they show us where they want to be or where they're sitting.
Well, you know, we talked a lot earlier about the strange weather we've had in this part of the country.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing we're kind of like in the middle of the spawn. Some fish have probably, already spawned out.
Yep.
Some probably still waiting to move up.
Yeah.
As much fluctuating waters as we've had, it kind of spreads that out a lot more.
Yeah. The fish are in every different stage right now, and they're sort of a little bit scrambled and mixed up, but especially on this lake, fish want to wait until that water's up and it's going to stay there before they really flood the bank and start to spawn.
Right.
So that's kind of what we've had, but then we've also had a couple of really cold nights and cold mornings, which has cooled the water down. So the water's been up as high as 70, now it's as low as 60. At this time of year, you don't really want to see that. You want to be seeing those consistent temperatures and that water rising up, but
right.
It's actually prolonged this bite because the warmer it gets, the more they're going to start moving out deeper. While they're shallow, that's when they're going to really want to eat this thing. So it is actually, oh, there was a bite. God, that was crazy, just missed it. Line just jumped. Yeah, sometimes you can get some super aggressive bites and your line will jump and you'll know you're on, but more often than not, you'll think you've got the bottom and then you'll sort of just lean into it, and if that bottom just gets spongy, that's when you've got a big one, and you've probably got it hooked and you're going to get it in because you've allowed that fish to grab it and get all of those hooks into it. Nice one, big one. That's a good fish. That's a nice fish.
I'd say so.
Get in here, yes.
Awesome job, Carl.
Well, we wanted to show you.
That is what we came to see. That is what glide bait does for you.
Just nothing, and then bang. Oh, he's gonna. There you go. Oh, look at that.
Get a picture of it while we're at it.
That is cool. That is why you throw the glide right there. So we've been out here an hour or so, maybe a bit longer, and we've had a couple of follows, and then your whole day can change in one cast, just like that. Just bang. Both
beautiful, healthy fish.
And just a big, fat, healthy glide bait eater. Sweet.
This portion of our program is brought to you by Strike King, Lose, Go Ahead, Tie One On, by Ranger Boats, Quality Redefined, Performance Reimagined, and powered by Mercury. Do more of what you love on the water. Back to Anglers Channel Extra, brought to you by Sportsmans Warehouse.
Like we've got a big flat, you know there's like nothing, but here and here we've got perfect little like rock bar, just little break up, little shell bar, and then we've got a lay down and a like a little rock bar here. It's going to end up behind us and moving forward. And so the 360 is showing us don't cast here and here. This is where you need to be casting. Tournament wise, for all you tournament anglers out there, there's pretty much 3 options that I have when it comes to using a glide bait in a tournament scenario. So I've kind of narrowed it down to when, where, why, and how I'm going to use it. And you have to be really careful because it's addicting. You can see giants following it, and some people just, and I've done it before, and I did it last year where I got into it too much and I couldn't put it down, and it cost me. But in 2018, I utilised it perfectly, and it gave me my best year ever. And so my 3 scenarios, the first one is the main one that you want to use. This is the main scenario where you want to utilise a glide bait. And that is, you're in a tournament, you've figured out a good pattern, say fishing a jig on some rock, offshore, whatever. You've got that dialed in and you think 17, 18 pounds is a big bag and that's what you want to catch. If you go out there and you catch that, and you've got your 16 to 18 pounds, you're like, okay, I'm sitting good, I've worked on those fish, I want to leave them alone. I've still got 2 hours to go, 3 hours to go. You might have 5 hours, it might happen quick. I'm going to put those rods down, I'm going to pick a glide bait up, I've got a big bag, I'm going to fish relaxed, I'm going to fish slow, and I'm going to use that glide bait all day. And then next minute, you're going to catch a 5, 6, 7 plus pounder, a fish that wouldn't have eaten your jig or any other bait. It's just like, you tend to catch fish on glide baits that are just glide bait fish that are very hard or difficult to catch on anything else. Now you crack that 7 pounder, now you've got 22 and you're like, you're in the lead, or you're second, or you're top 5 instead of being in that 20s or 30s. And so being able to have a good bag and be relaxed and fish it slow, and then use it to crack that 1 or 2 giants to put you just way up ahead of everyone, that's the way that I love to use it. And that's the way I've used it in the past to have some of my best tournaments. the second way is when all the conditions line up. Everything comes together and it's ideal glide bait time of year and scenario. And for me, that 2018, I had it happen to me several times, but Gunnersville was one of them. The Coaster Championship there, I got wind, cloud and sun cover, nasty conditions. Those fish were shallow and they were trying to eat big baits, and I fished the glide bait all day and I had 7 bites, landed them all, had almost 21 pounds and was leading the event out of 250 boats. Ideal scenario. Had all my rods away, picked up a glide bait, never put it down all day. Knew that I was going to get enough bites to put them in the boat, and then that in turn put me in the lead, because that glide bait's just in general going to get bigger bites than everyone else. So that's kind of an ideal scenario, but that's rare. It's rare to find that, and especially to do it 2, 3, 4 days in a row. And then the third scenario is also the one that I've used a lot, and I've got some unbelievable stories from this, and that's to save you when you've had a really tough day, nothing's gone right, you've got 12 pounds in the live well and you've basically got no chance of getting a check or making a jump. You got 30 minutes to go, you got an hour to go, you got 10 minutes to go. Doesn't matter how much, one cast can change your whole day or your whole tournament with a glide bait. And so when I'm in trouble and I'm like, I need a Hail Mary, I'm going to pull the glide bait out in that last part, and I'm going to try and salvage my tournament with 1 or 2 fish. And Champlain, in that one of those years, I had 12 pounds, I had a good bag the first day, had 12 pounds the second day. I'm going to come in the 80s. I'm running back in, I've got 22 minutes to go. I stop on a wind-blown rock point. I caught a back-to-back 5.5 and 6.5 pound largemouth, boat flipped both of them on an 8-inch glide bait, ran in and made the top 12 cut. So like, they were 2 of the greatest fish catches probably of my life, but that has happened quite often to me, especially with one fish that I've needed just to get me over the line. So 3 of my main scenarios are where I utilise a glide bait in a tournament situation. They've done a really good job with this bait as far as like getting it right for the different hooks. So we'll go over it later, but there's 3 different types of hooks. We've got number 2s on this, and they're actually pretty little and pretty light, but that's what's helping it suspend because I think these fish are super shallow. So I want to cast it in 2-3 feet and only have it sit a foot down and not sink into the bottom. But as these fish get deeper, and say if I wanted to go back over and fish that deeper contour where I caught that fish, I'd put the 1s on here. And then when I got on deeper bluff walls or deeper banks, I'd put 1-0s on, and that's how you start to adjust your fall. Pretty much all hook size. Another nice one. That's about, oh, lucky. Oh, stay there, mate. That was lucky. Oh, he's got hooks in him everywhere.
Yeah, you do have to be careful not to get a hook in your own finger.
Yeah. God, they both hooked the same way. Man, he's crushed it. Cool thing is, it doesn't, you do catch giants on them, but you can still catch just nice solid fish. Like that sort of size fish will eat it, no problem.
Right.
That's what's good about a 6-7 inch size bait. Sweet. One mistake that people make is they buy too small of a glide straight away, thinking that that's going to help them like get bites or be easier to work, but it's actually the opposite. The bigger the glide, the more attraction and easier it is to actually going to get fish on it. The smaller the glide, you have to be like exactly dialed in to what those fish are eating.
Right.
Like it has to exactly suit what's happening, where the bigger you go, just the more attraction they have to draw fish in and actually eat it.
Right. Well, it's kind of like if you put a small steak on my plate or a big steak, which one am I going to?
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the big one every time.
Yep. Oh no! Ah! Yeah, that felt like a good one. Ah, I felt that it went dunk and it never come up tight, and when I went to crank, it was just tight. When I leaned up on him, he had it, but just came off. It's a real deep edge too, it drops right down. I was fishing that real slow. So a few things to do when you first buy your glide bait. I like to upgrade everything. You know, Molex does a great job. They have good hooks, good split rings. Everything's ready to go straight out of the box and it'll be fine. But when you're chasing, you know, double-digit style fish, I like to upgrade everything and try and give myself the best advantage to put those fish in the boat. So the first thing I do that everyone asks about is the snap swivel, and the snap and the swivel. And usually I would build this whole thing by getting a different snap and putting a swivel on it, but Owner have done the perfect one. It's just called a snagless snap. I really, really like it. It has no chance of coming undone the way they've got that locking point in. And the reason you need a swivel is like multiple casts, hundreds of casts all day, a glide bait will spin in the air generally when you're casting it around wind. So the swivel's gonna stop your fluorocarbon from twisting up. And what the snap's gonna do is give it a big wide pivot point to be able to glide and turn and dart and do what it's supposed to do. So you gotta have that egg style snap on there to get the bait to swim how it's supposed to swim. Hook wise, I'm gonna change the split rings out to Owner split rings, 60, 70 pound split rings, and I can also go up and down in them trying to adjust the bait how I want it to actually swim. And then hook wise, it's literally 2, 1 or 1-0. And I've got 2s on right now. I'm gonna use that because we're casting up into super shallow water and I want that glide bait to actually suspend and hang up in that shallow water. I'm gonna go to the 1s when I want to go that little bit deeper, just out of sight, that 4 to 5, 6 feet zone. And then I'm gonna go to the 1-0 when I wanna get it down deep, deeper on docks, bluff walls, off some sort of shallower ledges or points. So that's the difference when I'm gonna actually change my hooks up, is to actually get that bait to go deeper or shallower. So they're my upgrades that I do on my glide bait, and straight through onto a 25 pound sunline shooter and you'll be ready to roll.
Well guys, did you learn anything? I know Kenneth did, and I did too. I bet you he's at Sportsmans Warehouse right now picking out a whole assortment of glide baits to fill his tackle box with. After that, I bet you will be too. A huge thanks to our buddy Carl for taking the time out to show us all the details about the glide bait and really give us the 411 on how he likes to throw it and how it can be an effective bait for you too. Guys, thanks for watching this week's Anglers Channel Extra. Make sure you wash your hands, put your life jacket on. We'll see you soon.